they say no and it makes sense to go through and try that case, we're going to do it because we have the skills to do it. And in the end of the day, that doesn't make that case go to trial. The truth is only 1 or 2% of cases go to trial. But because the other side knows that our law firm has the ability and the capabilities, and the third party has looked at us, the state of Florida, and said, you're board certified trial lawyer. The other side knows we're going to try that case if they don't pay a reasonable settlement and it makes sense to do so. So what does that do? It ends up that we end up getting better settlements for our clients oftentimes because they know that if they don't pay a reasonable amount, we're going to go to trial. So I think it's an important distinction for a consumer.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we interview lawyers at the top of their game to learn about the various facets and ins and outs of the law, because we want to help you navigate those ins and outs. Because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Scott Distasio, who runs a law firm that bears his name, the Distasio Personal Injury Law Firm. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. Well, as always, we're going to jump over first and take a look at Scott's site. That is distasiofirm.com. As always, we will have a link down in the description below. So you're free to go down there and check it out. He also has a phone number that is 813-259-0022. There may be other numbers, I don't know. But that's at least the one on the website. So I know that you'll be able to get a hold of him that way, and we'll definitely include that in the call as well. So there's an 813 number, a couple 813 numbers, so you can go check out his website, and a 727 number. Maybe we'll put them all in the description down below. Before we get started, we are going to jump over and read from two of our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is Groove Funnels. If you love spending $5,000 to build a brand new website, and you love paying monthly hosting bills of $200 to $300 a month just for a platform that allows you to sell products to your potential clients and customers, then by all means keep doing whatever it is you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-new, all-in-one website funnel sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsame. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a completely free website at no cost. Truly no cost, no credit card needed. You can build, actually, I believe, up to 3 fully functioning websites at theattorneypost.com/groove. They have a huge list of apps in the platform that'll turn it into a webinar platform, a sales funnel platform, a website, a blog, as well as an affiliate program and more. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove today to get started. And yes, again, it is absolutely free, no credit card needed. It'll replace a lot of the major online avenues that people use to make websites, buy, sell, trade, everything. So very, very cool platform. And again, completely free to go in and check it out. Our second sponsor today is National ERC. You may have just noticed that the world went through a pandemic not that long ago, and many businesses were forced to shut down and reduce their hours and had supply chain interruptions and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress recently passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. This is essentially free money for your business that can be spent in whatever way you think makes the most sense right now. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can go and calculate and see how much you could get back by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business they work with gets back over $200,000 to invest in their business that never needs to be repaid. The calculator is completely free, and there's never any fee unless they secure funding for you. They've helped over $1.3 billion get back in the hands of small business owners like yourself. Visit nationalerc.org. All right. So again, I am joined by Scott. Scott, welcome to the Attorney Post. He is the founder of Distasio Law Firm. He cemented his reputation as an ethical and trusted personal injury lawyer. He is a Florida bar certified civil trial lawyer, which is a remarkable achievement held by less than 1% of all Florida lawyers, which designates him as an expert trial lawyer. His legal acumen has been recognized with the highest AV rating from Mortondale-Hubbell. He's a proud member of the $1 Million Advocates Forum and an exclusive group, which is an exclusive group of less than 1% of lawyers. So again, he's in the 1% of the 1%. He began his legal journey attorney at the University of Florida Levin College of Law. Started his career in Tampa defending individuals and corporations in 2000. He shifted his focus to championing the rights of the injured. And today he's licensed to both Florida and Pennsylvania and is admitted to several U.S. district courts, the U.S. Court of Appeals, and even the U.S. Supreme Court. He's a member of numerous prestigious legal associations, and his career is a testament to his commitment to justice, ethics, and service. So without further ado, we're going to dive into what makes Scott Scott. And so, Scott, question number one, that was a mouthful to say, but I'm sure I missed out some of the most important parts. So question number one is, what did I miss?
Well, I think it's easy to talk about your accomplishments, but I think the most important thing to me is my wife and two grown children.
Awesome. How old are your kids?
My son is 22 and my daughter is 24.
Awesome. I've got five. My oldest is 18 and just went to college. And my youngest is, or sorry, my oldest, what did I say? Yeah, I have five. And my oldest is 18. My youngest is 5. And then all in the midst there too. So we got a fourth grader, a sophomore in high school, a senior in a freshman in high school, a junior in high school, and a freshman in college. That's how it works out. They keep you busy.
Wow, that's a lot. I remember those days of raising young children and having that many. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's got to get you gray somehow, right? Well, Scott, if I didn't know anything about you, I didn't know anything about your firm, and you and I were stuck in an elevator for 20 minutes or 20 seconds or whatever it happened to be, and I asked you, what do you do? What do you do?
Sure. We handle most any type of personal injury case, all the way through settlement. If it doesn't settle, we go to trial. But our real expertise is in nursing home abuse and neglect and medical malpractice. We do handle our fair share of car crashes and slip and falls, but the people recognize me more for the complex medical, legal-oriented personal injury cases.
Gotcha. And so you work principally in Florida, even though you are licensed in Pennsylvania. Is that right?
Yeah, that's accurate. I mean, we handle cases statewide in Florida. I do have a license in Pennsylvania. When I was working at another law firm, I did some cases up there, but primarily Florida.
Gotcha. My wife is from Pennsylvania, so I've got a bit of a soft spot for it. I understand why she said she never married a guy from Kansas because she didn't want to get stuck out here, and well, here we are. That's life. So tell me a little bit about your journey into law, Scott. Were you the type of person who just always knew that law was going to be your career? The other kids are outside playing G.I. Joe and you were inside playing Perry Mason, or did you kind of fall into law as kind of a secondary or even accidental thing? And then what got you from law into PI?
Sure. Yeah, actually, I mean, the truth is I really didn't have any plans of being a lawyer. I went to college thinking I would go to Wall Street. I was in the PhD program of economics. And the truth is, in college, I started to have this dream. I was in the engineering program, and I started dreaming in the middle of the night that I was in a room and people were putting formulas in and I was solving it. And I said, that's just not for me. So I got out of the College of Engineering and I moved into business, and then I moved towards economics, and I was in the PhD program of economics, and I started having that dream again because, quite frankly, economics is in the PhD program is really applied mathematics, and you picture yourself in a dark room in a little slot, and formulas are being stuck in, and you're solving them. And I again, this is not for me. So somebody said, you should go to law school. And I said, okay. And I signed up and there we go. I mean, I had no idea what kind of lawyer I would be in my last year actually second to last year of law school. A friend of mine was clerking in a medical malpractice law firm, said, why don't you apply? So I got a job over the summer in a medical malpractice defense firm, mostly because they wanted to meet the guy that was friends with the guy they had hired. I got there and I really liked it. I got out of law school. They offered me a full-time job. I became a medical malpractice defense lawyer for 10 years, represented most of the major hospital systems here in the Tampa Bay area. And I was regional counsel for a lot of larger nursing home chains. And, the firm started to break up. I was left with the decision of taking all of those clients and moving into another law firm or doing something different. And I got to tell you, having represented nursing homes for a solid 10 years, I kind of felt like the practice of medicine had been changing. It used to be about the doctor making judgment calls and judgment decisions, but over those years, it started to become more of a business, and in large medical organizations and the bottom line and financial outcomes. And the truth is, as a medical malpractice defense lawyer, I felt more like, especially in the nursing home arena, I was just there to help them deny care to make money. And I got tired of it. The nursing home chains in the Florida area, most of them, they understaff their facilities. Most of the injuries that occur are because of those understaffing. There's not enough staff there. And so after 10 years, as this firm is breaking up, I fired millions of dollars of repeat business and walked out with a 2-year-old and a young baby and a wife, and helped start a plaintiff's personal injury law firm on laptops and cell phones. And I kind of never looked back.
Pretty brave. Well done on that. My goodness, that is.
I don't know if it was
awesome.
as brave as it was naive
or stupid. One of the two, right? there's a fine line between stupidity and genius, right? And some of us clearly can navigate that very well. I was actually in a similar boat. I got into marketing because I was pursuing my PhD in philosophy and history, and I realized with 3 kids at the time, I was like, I'm qualified to ask the deep questions in life, like paper or plastic, or you want fries with that? But this isn't really putting food on the table right now, and so that led me down to the path that I went down as well. So I respect anyone who just kind of sees it and says, you know what, I got to make that change, and especially with young kids, man, it takes a lot. That does take guts. It really does.
I got to tell you, these nursing home cases have a lot of complex discovery, a lot of document production, and you get things from your client in documents that, and there'd be a little sticky note on it, don't produce that. And it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for their staff to take that document out and not give it to me, because when I'm looking at it, it's demonstrating why they're guilty, and then you're in this dilemma as a lawyer. You have to defend your client, but you also have to follow your ethics. And quite frankly, I got tired of it. And so when I fired all of those clients, and we just started suing them, I became a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer and started suing nursing homes, suing hospitals, doctors, and like I said, a fair volume of car crash cases.
Gotcha. So let me ask you a little bit, because I'm pretty familiar with the ins and outs of injury law. I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the different areas. One thing you said a minute ago that kind of made me realize that there's probably an interesting overlap between medical malpractice and nursing home abuse. When I think of nursing home abuse, I think of abuse. I think of, neglected seniors, in the corner being, stolen from or whatever. And we've seen the stories on TV, but there's probably, especially in a large institution where there's just not a lot of eyes on the patients, not a lot of care, you probably do get messed up prescriptions. You maybe even get people going in for the wrong surgery or something. I don't even know. Tell me about that overlap.
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 things. First, in the state of Florida, the laws are a little different, and medical providers have huge protections in the state of Florida with regard to bringing personal injury claims against them. And there's this whole pre-suit process. And so the nursing homes have one set, the hospitals and doctors have another set. So from a legal standpoint, it's a little different. But from a consumer standpoint, you send your loved ones to a nursing home or assisted living facility, and you expect them to provide care for those individuals. When I say abuse and neglect, I'm not talking about financial abuse and neglect. The reality is that nursing homes don't tend to steal money from patients. Now, maybe their wedding rings, their clothes, things like that. Unfortunately, a claim against the nursing home for those types of things, although it happens often, employees do that, it is really not something that financially is going to work out. But what we look for is personal injuries in nursing homes, and they're very unique because of the staffing levels. The government has minimum staffing levels. They're always just barely enough to provide care. But when the nursing home has this goal of bringing in people who need more care than average because they get paid more for people with what's called a higher acuity level, you need to be turned and repositioned because you have pressure points on your body. You need to have a feeding tube. These things need more care. Well, what the nursing home does is they solicit those clients to increase that acuity level, but they don't raise the staffing level to get the higher level of staff, more staff to take care of those people. They still staff at the minimum staffing levels and say, look, we've got plenty of staff. Well, what happens in those situations? People need to be turned and repositioned because if they're not, and you're elderly and you're laying in bed in the same position, you'll develop what's called a bed sore or pressure sore. And these things, start off as just this, like a little blister. But if you don't take care of them, you don't jump on it, you don't turn and reposition the person, provide the proper medications on their skin, those will turn into massive, massive sores that are like craters all the way to the bone, and you have necrotic tissue, and they'll get infected because people are, quite frankly, can't get up to go to the bathroom, and they'll lay in their own waste, and they'll die of infections and sepsis from these sores. Or you'll have people who are on feeding tubes, and those feeding tubes get clogged, and there's not enough staff to clean them on a regular basis, and they stop working, and the person begins to become very malnourished, and then that feeding tube gets infected, and they again get sepsis. Or you're supposed to be getting a certain medication on a regular basis, and somehow they're not giving it to you. You're supposed to be getting your medication, they give you someone else's, and you overdose on the wrong medicine. You are unable to walk very well, and you're in your bed and you need to go to the bathroom, and you ring your call bell and nobody responds. You get to the point where I'm not going to lose my dignity and lay here and go to the bathroom on myself. So you attempt to get up and you fall and you break your hip. I mean, these are the types of things that we see in nursing homes on a regular basis. I call that abuse and neglect. You can call it a personal injury case. You can say they were negligent because they did something they shouldn't have done or something like that, and it caused injury. But in my mind, this is a conscious decision on some nursing home chains to purposely understaff in order to make more money. Because the less staff, the more you save on costs, the more money you make. Now, is that with every nursing home? No. And is that with every chain? No. But there's a substantial number of them that they think people are widgets and not human beings. And it's just an awful thing that happens in this industry.
Being down in Florida, I know that it's one of the large, that in Arizona, like the two biggest retirement communities out there. Would you say that nursing home abuse is a bigger issue just by the numbers or per capita in Florida than it is in most other states? Or is it still going to be kind of hit and miss? Or, most people retiring in Florida just retire to their own home. Like, what do you feel is the base rate there?
Yeah, I think that statistically per capita, Florida probably has a little higher level of these types of claims. Now, you'll hear the industry say that that's because of people like me who are bringing lawsuits that shouldn't be. And I reject that wholeheartedly. It's like the fox guarding the hen house and claiming that there's those chickens are being stolen by somebody else. It's the fox, right? I mean, at the end of the day, in Florida, the legislature, in my mind, has passed certain protections for these nursing home chains that are causing a lot of this. Number one, you have minimum staffing levels that should be higher. Number two, you do not have to have a large insurance policy in the state of Florida for malpractice. A lot of these places have $50,000 insurance policies They create shell corporations so that the license holder is the only entity that has no assets, but it's the one that does wrong. They have a management company, a company that owns the property, and you sue the license holder, and well, there's $50,000, and you get a judgment against them. So what? You know, and so they think they're insulated. So when an entity thinks they have no ability to be held accountable, what do? They take advantage. And a lot of lawyers won't take these cases because it's not easy. It's not, there's $1 million policy, you make your claim and you hold them accountable. Instead, you have a long protracted fight and you have to get paid out of their corporate assets. And sometimes they declare bankruptcy to avoid your lawsuits. So you really have to, A, know what you're doing, and B, know how to work that system and be willing to take that risk. Our law firm does that because we feel passionate about this, number one. And number two, I've been doing it for 30 years now, and so I know the ins and outs. And personally, I believe wholeheartedly that because of the protections, allowing minimum health and liability insurance, and allowing these companies to be shells like this, they think they're protected. So you have more claims than other places.
Gotcha. I don't know if you can answer this question or not. Feel free to answer with as much or little clarity as you require, but do you find yourself going up against the same facilities again and again? Like there's some that are just chronic abusers, or do you tend to just get a smattering, one here, one there, you know, maybe an overlap once in a while?
Yeah, there's certainly some one-off facilities, right? That they're trying to do the right thing, but their staff is negligent. They make judgment calls that are wrong, and a reasonable employee would have made a different judgment call, and they have a bad outcome. There's certainly those one-off facilities. But in general, yeah, we see the same players over and over and over again. Absolutely.
Gotcha. We just went through a pandemic not that long ago. One of my sponsors, obviously, is National ERC. They help people with employees who kept their employees on during the pandemic to get paid. And obviously, that pandemic affected everybody. And that's why companies like National ERC are even a thing. It definitely affected everyone in different ways. Different states took different measures. I know Florida, you know, like many states, kind of locked down early on, but also seemed to let up a little bit sooner than a lot of others. But you're also dealing in your particular capacity with a lot of elderly people who were probably more at risk for that certain virus that went around that I won't say, just in case YouTube wants to flag the video. Although I already said it in the pre-rolls or whatever. Did the lockdowns, did the response to the pandemic, did that affect your firm and the way that you work with clients, the way you work with various legal entities, courtrooms, and whatnot? How did it affect your firm, and has most of that gone away, or are you carrying some of that forward? What's that look like on your end?
Well, it changed everything, and it didn't change everything. And what I mean by that is, first, in Florida, we did have a lockdown pretty early, but the protections kind of were eliminated a lot quicker, number one. And number two, for small organizations, they didn't apply at all. So we tried immediately to go remote. And we were only remote for about 3 weeks. My experience with that is that some staff members worked real hard from home and others didn't, quite frankly. And you learned who pretty quickly was just there for a paycheck. And then we made a decision as a firm, because we're 6 people, really not a big law firm, that we would work in the office, and we met the requirements to do that. So we went pretty quickly to working in the office on a daily basis. So when I say it didn't affect us that much, that's what I mean. But from the standpoint of it affected everything tremendously in the court systems. First off, the cases just shut down. There's a huge backlog. They didn't move. And then finally, the court systems, at least in Florida, were very technologically adverse. They had to adapt technology, right? I mean,
Yep.
we all learned Zoom. We all learned how to show documents and share screens. And we started taking depositions on Zoom or Teams or something comparable. And the court systems started using them as well. And what happened was there's this huge shift. As we went out of the pandemic, we're not really going back. The courts have recognized that 90% of hearings in front of judges can be done remotely. And it saved people tremendous amount of time and money because you don't have to travel to those locations. You're just sitting in your office. The defense likes it because the defendants don't have to pay their lawyers for it. And the depositions, we've learned how to take them where we put people under oath and ask them questions and show documents. And about 80% of those depositions are still remote. In the complex medical cases, I got to tell you, I want to be face to face with somebody. And, I will get a lot of objection because everybody's used to the status quo. A lot of defense lawyers, the lawyer sitting in his house instead of at his office and doesn't want to make the drive. But there's certain key employees I need of the other side. I need to have them in front of me, looking them eye to eye and talking with them because I feel that I can really size them up better. So some key depositions we still take in person. And obviously trials are all in person too now, but during the pandemic, they were not.
Absolutely. I've heard a couple of people say they're afraid that we would eventually get around to doing Zoom trials, and the whole idea of, as somebody said to me, so the thing about being in court is you can look over at the jury at any time, and sometimes the defense will say something and that what they said wasn't right or was wrong, and you can cast a side eye, and you and that one juror lock eyes, and you're just on the same wavelength, and and he knows, and at that point it's almost a done deal. And obviously Zoom is very different. Like, this is me simulating eye contact with you, but in reality I'm looking at a screen, you're looking at a screen, and it sort of looks like eye contact, but it's not a perfect system. So do you fear a time when people might decide that the world of the digital is so important and so good, and that they want to make that the norm? And also the flip side of that question, do you think that there would be room to argue that because you're not in person, you theoretically could be more objective if as a juror rather than not if you're on a Zoom style hearing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't think the court system is ever going to eliminate in-person trials. I think that we had that experiment in the pandemic, and it's exactly what you said. Can you do it? Yes. But is that the best way to size up the credibility of people? Is that the best way for the jury to see what's really happening? The answer is no. I mean, I can remember trying a case in the early 90s, and of course, this is going to really date me because my closing was about a jukebox, and people today don't even know what that is. It's a little player in a restaurant or a bar that you popped your quarter in and you played a song. Right now, we have our iPhones, and those things are obsolete. But what I would say is, ladies and gentlemen, that expert, you heard him say a lot of things, but was it credible? It's like taking a quarter and putting it in the jukebox and playing a song. That defense lawyer over there picked up a quarter and he put it in the jukebox, and that jukebox is that expert, and that expert is playing the song that lawyer picked, and it. And I started going through what he was saying, and I got a juror going like this, and they're, just bobbing his head, right? I knew that was a win, right? I don't get that personal connection when I'm on Zoom. There's certain things that don't happen, and I think that the parties, the defendants, the lawyers, everybody recognizes that, and I just don't think that we're going to let this system become a system where everything is done by Zoom. But I do think there's some efficiencies to it, and there's times when it's perfectly fine. But the downside, with a juror is some of them are just not paying attention, and you can't even tell. So I think there's some pluses and minuses to having it in the court system, but I don't think it's something that is going to happen for jury trials.
Not going to be the norm. Have you ever been on a jury?
I have not been on a jury. I've gone down. I would love to be on a jury. I have been questioned, but on 2 occasions, each time they have decided that I was not an appropriate person for the jury. I think they were afraid that I would be the decision maker, and whether it was for one side or another, I don't know. But lawyers tend to not get picked for those types of things.
That's what I hear. I didn't know if maybe even before you had completed law school, maybe you got pulled for jury duty. I've been summoned for it multiple times, but I've never had a chance to sit on a jury either. So I did find myself. I came back from Christmas vacation a few years ago and found myself in contempt of court because apparently the notice came out like probably it went out like 2 days before we left, but it didn't arrive until like the day we left, so I never saw it. And we were gone for 2.5 weeks, and so I'd missed the hearing and missed the show up date. And I mean, I went in, they cleared it up pretty quickly. They understood, but. So I did find myself in contempt of court once for not showing up to jury duty, but it was completely an accident. So, well, Scott, let me ask you this. You've clearly have quite a legal career. You have been doing this for a while. You've got a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, and that comes from experience, guaranteed. And of course, not all experiences are sunshine and roses. We all have our, you bat long enough, you don't bat 1,000. You might bat 1,000 the first couple times. If you knock it out of the park, you might bat 0 first couple times. But we all have mistakes. I'm a firm believer that a mistake is really only a failure if you fail to learn something from it. But if you learn from it and carry it forward, then, it makes you better at what you do. I'm sure you've probably experienced a couple of mistakes or a couple of what you would consider to be failures in your legal career. Can you let my listeners know about, 1 or 2 of those times where, maybe just things didn't go your way, maybe a witness said the wrong thing, maybe you filled out the wrong form, whatever it happened to be, but something that led to a failure, but also what you learned from it and how you carry that forward to help your clients.
Sure. Yeah. I think that any good lawyer remembers their losses more than their wins, and you can't kind of carry them around with you, and they help you become better. I distinctly remember as a young lawyer trying a personal injury case, and kind of you don't have a lot of guidance sometimes. You're figuring it out as you go, and going to trial and dealing with judges that have opinions and want you to act and say and speak in a certain way. And that judge's opinion may be wrong. And how do you deal with that, right? And I can remember in a trial wanting to have there's a lawnmower that was, in my mind, defective, and they had this gear up here. It was this long pole that a gear that you could shift the lawnmower in and out of the blade spinning. And mom did something stupid. There's no doubt. She put her child on the hood of the lawnmower, right? But the gear was not engaged, and you could drive it without the gear engaged. And so she's driving the lawnmower, kind of giving her child a ride, but the blade's not spinning. And mom's knee bumped that big lever, and the child actually had fallen before, and the child fell, and mom leaned forward and bumped the lever, and the child leg got chopped up pretty badly in the blade. And I can remember asking the judge for a demonstration, had the lawnmower there, and the judge wouldn't let me. The judge basically had the lawnmower that they could see, but wouldn't let me get on it, and kind of bumped the gear. And I always remember, should I have said more? Should I have been stronger about that? And as a young lawyer, you see this person with a robe, and they're supposed to be the decision maker. And I think that I should have been a better advocate for that position. We ended up losing, and I I can see why we lost. I still think that in Florida, there was something at the time called comparative negligence. Certainly mom, for putting her child up there, shouldn't have done that, but her belief that the rotor wasn't spinning, I think is something a reasonable person would do. And that lever was clearly defective in my mind. And I've always felt that if I was able to demonstrate that physically instead of just talk about it, that we might have had a different outcome. And so what I learned from that is that judges are people, they make decisions, and I need to be a firm advocate with that judge. And just because they say something doesn't make that true. And that I need to be much more firm in my discussions with the judge and make them put on the record why they're ruling the way that they are. And when they say something that doesn't make sense, challenge that in a polite, respectful manner so that A, the judge can then reconsider, and B, if they don't, that you have a record that's protected. So if you go up on appeal, that you'll be able to do that. And so I take from every loss some sort of lesson. And the loss from that was, the lesson was, you need to stand up to the judge and not let him push you around or her push you around just because they are the judge and are wearing a robe. That doesn't mean being disrespectful. It doesn't mean yelling or screaming. It means being firm advocate for your position.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's a very tragic situation. And at the same time, without being too macabre, it makes me imagine some pretty odd scenarios where if you were allowed to do the demonstration in court with the right amount of props, you could have definitely created quite a spectacle. But yeah, no, it really is an unfortunate situation. And I hope that in the end, at least the child was alive and hopefully he's able to have a meaningful life. I'm sure, I can't imagine as a parent how you have to feel after something like that happened, and knowing that you thought you take the safety precautions. I mean, yeah, putting your kid on the thing, sure, maybe not the smartest idea ever, but people give their kids fun rides all the time and don't give it a second thought. You're not expecting all the other things to happen that wind up happening. So yeah, that's rough. Let's put the shoe on the other foot, though. I am sure you've had some great wins. I'm sure you've had some moments that are really just like the feather in the cap. I mean, I'm just looking at your website. I see, big awards, 13 million, 12 million, 7 million. And sometimes the financial stuff is the big stuff. Sometimes it's not. But can you let my listener, Scott, know about one or two times in your practice of law where you had a win, and a win that just made you feel good, whether that was a win that changed the laws, whether that was a win that just made sure that somebody that was really, really hurt got the justice they deserved. What's one of the feathers in your cap when you fall asleep at night? Sometimes you just your brain goes back to, oh, that was such a good moment. I'm so glad that happened.
Yeah, it's not the money. The truth is, yeah, I make a good living. There's no doubt, but there's plenty of other things I could do to make a good living. I'm really truly doing this to help people. And I can remember a young baby who ended up with pneumonia, going into the hospital and ready to be checked out. And the doctor deciding they wanted to give that baby one dose of antibiotics and ordering a gram of Rocephin, which is an antibiotic, and being diluted by with lidocaine in order to numb in the injection. And the nurse, because the doctor's instructions weren't clear, miscalculating the amount of lidocaine to be put in that shot. And lidocaine is generally in small doses is not harmful. It's a numbing agent, right? But in large doses, it can be. And the mom is saying to the nurse, because she's got two huge full 10 cc shots that she's coming at her baby with, and mom is saying, that's too big. Don't do that. The nurse says, I know what I'm doing, and injects this baby's bottom with these two large shots, and the baby goes into cardiopulmonary arrest, and they revive the baby in just enough time for that baby to be brain damaged for the rest of its life. And I can remember meeting with that family and saying, I'm going to help, and being able to do that, and going through the legal process and holding out and getting the case resolved for amount of money that would allow that family to take care of that child for the rest of their life. Because the reality is, yeah, there's the Medicaid system, there's the Medicare system, but they don't provide the types of needs that this child's going to need on the level that it's going to need. And there's all kinds of extra things. And I'm so grateful to be able to help people like that get a recovery that allows, it's not going to change what happened to that child. That child is still going to be in a permanent vegetative state. But that family is a very religious Christian family that felt strongly that we needed to take care of this child. And we were able to do that. And that's just, one of the circumstances that I kind of think about and say, yeah, we did right there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about the smallness of a child and the largeness of some of those syringes. Like that feels like such a, gosh, that's such a terrible situation to be in. But again, one of the things I've always appreciated about personal injury law is that you guys really do. You step into the breach, and you oftentimes are the safeguard for people who, otherwise might not be able to get justice.
I really appreciate that statement, because the reality is somewhere between a third and 2/3 of the American public think that we are ambulance chasers, we are only out to make money, and that we're blackmailing people in order to make a living. And while there's a stereotype in every profession, and I'm sure there's something to be said from that on occasion, this statistically no different in our profession than any other as far as wrongdoers and bad actors. The reality is, I could talk for hours about how the frivolous lawsuit myth doesn't exist. The claims that a frivolous lawsuit is any lawsuit brought to hold somebody accountable. But at the end of the day, it's just nice to know that somebody can see through all of that and recognize that that's really what we're doing. We're not getting money for people. We're holding wrongdoers accountable for the actions that they caused and compensating people for the harm that's been caused. If you break a glass, you pay for it, right?
Yep.
Remember the old days, the old story about somebody out in the field, and they're hitting a ball, and the ball goes through the neighbor's window, and the kid wants to not pay for it, and dad brings him over to the house and teaches him that lesson. You broke that lady's window, you pay for it, and you apologize. That's all we're doing. The damage, instead of being a piece of glass, is damage to human beings. And I've never, ever understood why it is in this society that people think that it's okay to hold somebody accountable for breaking somebody's window, but it's not okay for holding somebody accountable for causing harm to a human being. I just don't get it.
My gut says it's a combination of a bunch of angry defense attorneys. And then, you take something that on the face of it sounds a little silly, like the very famous McDonald's hot coffee incident, where the lady initially was awarded millions of dollars. And of course, in subsequent summaries, it was taken down in appeals. But on the face of it, it feels silly. Like, oh, I've spilled coffee on myself. Why didn't I get $10 million, right? I'm sure that's probably most of it. But no, I've always been a very firm believer that, and in my line of actual work, most of the people I work with are injury attorneys. So I've always had a really kind of a keen appreciation for what you guys do, because, and you do take some slings and arrows as ambulance chasers and everything else. But I mean, you're filling a role, because I don't know, in Florida, I think the national average for hourly wages for a lawyer is like somewhere between $300 and $500. And I imagine in the bigger areas, it's probably closer to $700 to $1,500 an hour, right? That's a lot of money that most people just don't have. Most people couldn't afford 1 or 2 hours with an attorney under normal circumstances. And you guys, you take it all in stride and you say, listen, I see the virtue of your case, and I'm going to help you. And I'm only going to get paid if we are successful. And you guys incur expense. It's not like it's just your time. I mean, you get witnesses, you have to travel, you still have, a family, at least a wife.
Think about that. Think about that logically, right? Somebody says, you're in the business of bringing frivolous lawsuits. Okay. So I am going to work for 2 or 3 years sometimes on people's cases. I'm going to incur anywhere from $5,000 to $100,000 in costs and work all that time on the bet that I can convince 6 people that somebody else did wrong so I can get my money paid back and make an attorney's fees. How many people would do that on a frivolous lawsuit to blackmail people into paying? The truth is, if the lawsuit were frivolous, the other side would not pay. You'd go in front of a jury and you'd lose every time and you'd go out of business.
Yeah.
Now, do we lose from time to time? Yeah, but it's not because the lawsuits are frivolous. It's because there's a legitimate question of whether somebody's wrongdoing was responsible for that harm. And it's just fascinating because people don't think through logically what's being shoved down their throats by the publicity machine. You said, this is people just not thinking it through. That's true. But the bigger picture is that there's a group of corporate entities, insurance companies, and corporations that have lots and lots of money that spill the airways with half-truths and things that make people believe a certain way, and it influences people. Why have you ever seen that insurance company ad where there's a big crash, boom, and the guy gets up and walks away and says, "Thank God, but I'm glad I have my insurance company to fix my car." Or I'm the guy, the fraud investigator, and I saved this insurance company and their policyholders for all of this fraud, right? Why do they run those commercials? They don't run them because it gets you to pick that insurance company. They run those things to poison the field of potential jurors, to make them believe in big car crashes, people walk away without injury. Or in liability cases, people are committing fraud. So that in the back of those jurors' minds, they're hearing that commercial subconsciously. Is this one of those people that wasn't hurt in that crash? Is this one of those people that's committing fraud? And it's this subtle message that's being put out by corporate interests. Now, sometimes they're right, but believe me, that the amount of money that is spent to influence the population on these issues is just horrendous. And so the average person doesn't have time to think it through. And so what do? They go with their gut because this is what they're being told instead of thinking it through.
I'm pretty sure that a lot of what we consume as far as the media goes is put out there mostly to sway opinions, but we can leave that topic for another day, because I do try to keep my podcast not too political, but I'll tip my cards occasionally. I think my listeners, my longtime listeners, know where I fall politically. So but it all feels rather absurd, which is a really great segue to my next question. So I'll just segue right into that one. I'm sure in your practice of law, Scott, you have encountered absurdity. People making just the dumbest decisions, the dumbest mistakes, whatever it is, or a scenario that you never thought would happen in real life. One of those, you wouldn't have believed me if I told you. I couldn't have written this as fiction, but it's real. What's one of the most absurd things you've encountered in your practice of law?
Wow. That's a great question. I can remember, being in a deposition and asking a witness a question, and the witness just kind of goes off on a tangent and says, Scott, it was like when you were a little boy and you're with your dad and you got just your little BB gun and you pick up your BB gun and your dad's encouraging you, you pull that trigger and you hit that bird and it goes to the ground and you run over and you're all excited. And then you look and you see, and that bird is dead. And you pick it up and you realize as a young boy, you just killed an animal. And I've always remembered that. And it was nothing to do with what was happening. I think the witness was, maybe not as in touch with reality as he could be, because it really didn't have anything to do with what we were saying. But it was just kind of this awkward moment that I've always remembered. And I I don't know why.
Maybe it's because it's like when you were playing marbles and they go down the grate into the heater and then it's Thanksgiving.
There you go.
That's the best I can get out of that. Well, Scott, I want to first off say again, thank you. I don't want to monopolize your whole afternoon. So we'll probably move towards wrapping up here in a few minutes. I do want to ask you my two most famous questions that I always ask my clients or my guests on the show. And just to prep you for those, you have time to percolate on them. Question number one is if we're able to go back in time and meet a young Scott, what advice would you give yourself and why? Other than, of course, the obvious, which is buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it till 60K. Just trust me on this one. You don't know what Bitcoin is, but just trust me. Right. And then the other question is if I gave you my pen, and this is a magical pen. This is actually from a Benedictine monastery in Atchison, Kansas. I'm going to give them a free plug. It's kansasmonks.org. Kansas Monks. I don't know if I can get that in the Zoom window or not. kansasmonks.org. But I found this pen, and the monks had apparently blessed it because this pen can magically add laws to the books, strike laws from the books, or edit laws that are on the books. So if I were to loan you this pen and you could make one change, what change would you make and why? While you're percolating on that, we're going to jump over and take another look at your website, which for our listeners, again, as a reminder, is distasiolaw.com, I believe. Let me refresh that to make sure I have that right. Yep, Distasio Firm. I'm sorry, distasiofirm.com. We will have a link, should be the first thing down below in the description once this is live up on YouTube and in all the other places we go live to. You can also reach Scott by calling 813-259-0022. He is a personal injury lawyer specializing in nursing home abuse and neglect, as well as medical malpractice in Florida. He's had some really great success. He's been recognized by lots of people for a lot of the things he's done. And again, one of the things I didn't even get a chance to talk to him about is he is a barred lawyer. What's the word? Sorry, my brain is not wording good right now.
Board certified.
Board certified. Thank you. I kept coming up with the word bar. I'm like, I know you passed the bar, but board certified attorney. We might come back and I might ask you one more question about that too, because I think our listeners, they don't always know exactly what that entails and why that is such a very special thing. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But as always, you can find his website down below. That is distasiofirm.com, DISTASIO, distasiofirm.com. Our last sponsor today is Rank with News. Is not being in the news regularly costing your firm or your company credibility and visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is mostly just dumb luck, not really a matter of science? If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and others, and then see those articles rank locally, even nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people are actually searching for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page 1 in Google in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and oftentimes permanently. This is functionally guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization. On steroid, it's ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or firm, visit rankwith.news or rankwithnews.com to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page 1 of Google in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers or clients with Rank with News. All righty. And then let me go back over here. So there again is Scott's website. So question number one, I'm gonna jump ahead and ask about the first question first. Being a certified attorney, board certified. What does that mean? Why is that important? Why should people care?
Sure. So board certification in the state of Florida can happen in any particular subspecialty in law. I'm board certified in civil trial law. What that means is that I have tried enough jury trials and that I qualify to take an exam. And then after qualifying, there's a background check to ensure that you meet the standards of morality and the ability to try your cases. And then you take a written exam that's a day-long exam and you have to pass. About 1% of all lawyers in Florida are board certified, and it does make a difference. The reality is anybody with a law license can practice any particular type of law. There's nothing that prevents them from putting up their shingle and saying, I do this area of law. But the certification tells the consumer that that person not only does that area of law, but an independent organization has determined they have the skills to do it. There are a lot of firms that do personal injury law, but a lot of them just take cases in and settle them in order to get a volume practice, because it doesn't matter if they make a little more on this particular case, because they have enough cases, they just push them through. In my law firm, that doesn't happen. And I think that board certification is something that tells you that. What we do is, if there's a reasonable settlement on the table, it's up to the client, right? If they say no and it makes sense to go through and try that case, we're going to do it because we have the skills to do it. And in the end of the day, that doesn't make that case go to trial. The truth is, only 1 or 2% of cases go to trial. But because the other side knows that our law firm has the ability and the capabilities, and the third party has looked at us, the state of Florida, and said, you're board certified trial lawyer, the other side knows we're going to try that case if they don't pay a reasonable settlement and it makes sense to do so. So what does that do? It ends up that we end up getting better settlements for our clients oftentimes, because they know that if they don't pay a reasonable amount, we're going to go to trial. So I think it's an important distinction for a consumer.
Gotcha. That's a really powerful way to put it. Actually, it's kind of a marketing hook, not intended to be, but I mean, it's a differentiator. It really does it makes a big difference, and I think that's good to know. So, if you guys are looking for an injury attorney who's board certified, Scott might be your guy. Okay, fun questions. We go back in time. We meet young Scott, fresh out of law school, and you're able to give yourself some advice. And of course, by extension, anyone else today that finds himself fresh out of law school and trying to figure their way in the great wide world of law. What advice would you give yourself, and why?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I remember as a young person watching these movies where you could switch the young person would switch bodies with the older person, right? And they'd go through, and I never understood those movies. And then when I got older, there was this movie Freaky Friday where Jamie Lee Curtis switches bodies with her young daughter. And for the first time, I realized why those movies exist, and I really got it. Because as a young person, you don't have that experience in life, right? So you don't know things. But as an older person, to go back in time and live as a younger person, the things that you know can really lend value to the future. And so I think that going back in time and being able to say to me or any other lawyer, don't focus so much on what you want to specialize in. Whatever comes your way, do it. And not just do it, but do it to the best of your ability. Work as hard as you can to get the best result possible. And things will unfold for you. And don't worry about the ups and the downs, because there's gonna be. It's more important to focus and find the thing you're passionate about by doing many different things. And then once you've done them, it'll come to you. You won't have to look. You just do those different things, and one day you'll wake up and you'll be right where you want to be. And that, I think, is the most important thing that anybody should focus on. Steve Jobs said in a presentation, he went to India and he studied Sanskrit, and he didn't know why. He just did it, and he did his best and became an expert in Sanskrit. And then he went back and he founded Apple. And what is the basis of the most important graphics in computers? The Sanskrit that he learned on a lark, because he went to India to find himself, and he put that into the Apple, and the rest is history. So don't focus on this is what I want to do, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to do. Instead, do a lot of different things, but do them your best. And whatever you is meant to be in your life, it will come to you. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Gotcha. That and buy Bitcoin.
What's that?
That and buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, that too, right?
No, it's good advice. I appreciate that. Okay, so other question time. Magic pen time. I gave you my magic pen, and you can make one change. This can be a law that has sweeping national ramifications that affects everybody. This can be a stupid little law that's local and forces you to fill out forms in triplicate 8 times a week. If I gave you my pen, Scott, you can make one change. What change are you going to make and why?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of unique to Florida and my law practice, but the Florida legislature just passed what they call massive tort reform in the last legislative session, and it's supposed to, quote, reel in the frivolous lawsuits. But in reality, in my mind, it's just making it harder for people to make legitimate claims. And there's one in particular, it's in Florida, we have what's called comparative negligence, or DID. And in that, what that means is that if 2 or 3 people do wrong, and you as the plaintiff are one of them, the jury compares that negligence and decides what percentage to assign to each person. And then as the plaintiff, whatever percentage is assigned to you, you don't get. Well, the legislature just amended that to put a 50% threshold there. So if you're held 50% or more responsible in this new law, you get nothing, right? And it's sold as eliminate frivolous lawsuits, but really it is just giving people a free chance when they've caused harm not to pay their fair share. And I just, quite frankly, think it's wrong.
Gotcha. Well, good answer. I wish I could actually give you this pen. I wish you could make that change. Spoiler alert, the pen isn't actually magical, but it's always good to know. So, well, Scott, again, thank you very much for taking time to talk with me today and my listeners. I do always like to let my guest have the final word. Is there any parting thoughts or wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
No, I just enjoyed the podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and I appreciate talking to your listeners.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot, and got into some things I'd never really talked about before. And I always feel like for me, it's a win if I learn something new. And I feel like I learned a couple new things today, and really kind of reframed some of the ways I thought about things like elder care and elder abuse and whatnot. So absolutely fascinating.
All the guests.
Absolutely. Well, again, this has been the Attorney Post. I've been chatting with Scott Distasio of the law firm that bears his name, DistasioFirm.com. As always, link in the description down below. As always, this podcast does not constitute legal advice, and if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter you need help with. If you are in the Florida area and you have been injured, particularly if it's a medical malpractice issue or a nursing home case, because that seems to be what Scott really is just honed in on and does really well, I can clearly say after this call, he seems like he'd be an amazing resource, let alone the fact that he is, board certified. And I'm assuming he works like every other injury attorney, free consultation, and there's never a fee unless you are successful. So again, he takes all the onus on himself, which is really a very honorable way to run a law firm or run a business in general. So I've always really respected that. So as always, we'll have his links down below in the description, so I can recommend him quite highly. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, we always do appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're listening to this on any of the other podcast repositories, giving us a rating or review, comment, share, etc. And obviously, if you know somebody who's been injured and could benefit from this podcast, sharing this with them can be one of the best things to help them get out of the issues that they are facing. So until next time, this is Justin West reminding you, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys, and until next time, bye-bye.